So I'm going to ask you a question to start with. What is one of your favorite movies? Give that a little thought there. What do you really enjoy? Well, for Sherry and me, one of our all-time favorites is The Princess Bride. And in it, we love Mandy Patinkin's line, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Later in the film, Inigo Montoya complains that he's been in the revenge business for so long that he doesn't know what to do with himself now that the revenge is over. It's a humorous way of looking at our tendency to seek revenge when we are wrong. Now, a second question. What's your favorite Bible story? For many people, it's the story of Joseph in Genesis, because it's a story filled with tragedy and triumph, with wild plot twists and secret identity. It's a chance for truly serious revenge, to be like Inigo Montoya. But Joseph surprises everyone by following a different direction. He's more like Marcus Aurelius advised we all should be in Meditations when he said, "The best revenge is to be unlike the one who performed the injury." Today's story focuses on this very thing. To understand where we are when the scripture reading begins, we need to look backwards. We need to look at what came before. We need to know a little bit of the history of Joseph and his family. We need to know their backstory, as the writers say. Joseph, when he was at home as a kid, he was a pretty puffed up individual, and he had these dreams, and he interpreted the dreams. And the most powerful and the most irritating of all the dreams, and remember, Joseph is the youngest son, the youngest brother of all the brothers, and he says in his dream that all of his brothers and his parents would one day bow down before him. Didn't help that Joseph was also his father Jacob's favorite son. Oh, he doted upon this child, and he gave him this coat of many colors that was a constant reminder to his older brothers that Joseph was the favorite of the family. And then one fateful day, father sends Joseph out to check on his older brothers who are out working in a far field, and the brothers have had enough. Joseph brings up that dream again. And they decide they're going to get rid of Joseph. But one of the brothers, Reuben, said, no, let's not just kill him outright. Let's fake his death. We can sell him into slavery. They sent him off into Egypt. And they took his robe and they tore it and they put animal blood on it so they could convince their father Jacob that Joseph had met an untimely death by animal attack. So, in Egypt, far from his home, in an entirely different culture, and with no father hovering over him, Joseph learned some skills. He learned management skills. He learned people skills. And he worked his way up from slave to the head of the household of Potiphar, who was the captain of Pharaoh's guards. This is a pretty powerful position to end up in. And the narrator tells us that Joseph's success belongs entirely to God, that God is behind it all. And Joseph comes to a downfall because Potiphar's wife thinks he's a pretty good-looking young man, and she makes a pass at him, and Joseph doesn't respond as she expects, but he runs away. And she gets really angry about this. She's afraid of what might happen if Potiphar finds out the truth, and so she lies about Joseph, saying that he initiated the whole thing, and Joseph ends up in prison. Well, out of the depths he would rise again. And we need to remember that in our darkest days, that there are ups and downs in this life, and Joseph's life, if you look at it here, is a regular roller coaster ride, just like ours can be. Now the jailer is impressed with Joseph, and he gives him a supervisory role. You see, Joseph interpreted 3 dreams for 3 prisoners, and the interpretation proved to be sound. And word of this gets out. And Pharaoh himself is plagued by awful dreams. doesn't understand them one bit, and so he seeks out Joseph, this prisoner. And Joseph tells him the meaning of these frightening dreams. There will be 7 years of feasting and 7 years of famine in the land of Egypt, and we need to prepare for that. And Pharaoh is very impressed with Joseph and takes him out of prison and makes him second in command to Pharaoh alone. Gives him a position of extreme power and tells Joseph, you need to work out a plan so that there will be food for all the kingdom for 7 years so that we won't have disaster and death because of this famine. You need to plan ahead and see how this works. And this is where Joseph's brothers come back on the scene. This is where they meet Joseph, and they don't recognize him at first, but Joseph certainly recognizes them. He's now the second most powerful man in all of Egypt, and now he has his chance for revenge. He can Inigo Montoya himself all over his brothers right now. Brothers who were sent by Jacob, their father, to go out and get food because they too were starving from the famine. But Joseph identifies himself with God. And revenge just won't do. That's not what God's person does. So Joseph had been giving God all of the credit for his interpretations anyway. Where Pharaoh got him out of prison, he gave all the credit where the credit belonged, and in his position of power he remained humble. And now Joseph's character is going to be tested to the extreme, because he has this opportunity to do what humans naturally are inclined to do, to revenge himself upon those who hurt him so very badly years before. And now Joseph's character is being tested just as he tested his brothers. We'll get back to that. Joseph commands his staff in the opening, everyone leave now. He's in turmoil and he doesn't want his staff to see their boss in such terrible turmoil. And Joseph breaks down before his brothers, whom he has tested. And he tested them pretty hard. You should go and read the verses before and find out what he did to them, because he really wanted to see if they had changed, if they were different people than they had been previously. And Joseph himself had to work through a lot of dark emotions after being betrayed by his family. He would weep a number of times throughout this in verses prior and now. And Joseph would do something extraordinary. He would break a family pattern of deception and betrayal and heartbreak that extended back generations. He would refuse to continue that pattern into the future. He broke it. And so he reveals himself to his brothers. And they are terrified when they discover who this is in front of them, who the second most powerful man in all of Egypt is. And they thoroughly expect him to do what his family has done for generations. And instead, I want you to think about your darkest moments when you have fantasized, boy, if I ever see that person again, this is the withering speech I'm going to make to them. Sure, we've made those declarations to ourselves from time to time, but Joseph doesn't do that. Instead, he says, I am Joseph. Is my father really still alive? And he asks us with pained hope because he has no idea. He's been totally cut off from the family for a very long time. And here he also reveals something of his true self, which is critical in moments when we are looking for forgiveness. Now Joseph could have remained silent. He could have bent to the wills of others to have a false sense of peace. He could have traded who he was for the safety, acceptance, and success that comes from remaining quiet, but he doesn't do that. He asks his terrified brothers instead to come closer. And what he does next is what shatters generations worth of dishonesty and trickery and sibling rivalry. And he begins it with these words, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves." Joseph chooses to see what happened in the past differently. He reframes the issue, that's how we put it today. Rather than holding a grudge, rather than seeking revenge on his brothers for selling him into slavery out of spite, Joseph refrains, and Joseph reframes the event. This is not his brother's misdeeds intending harm to Joseph. No, he doesn't see it that way. He says, this is God putting me in the right place at the right time to save a great many lives. What you all, brothers of mine, intended for harm, God has used for good. Seeing events this way, Joseph is able to step beyond his human desire for revenge and to forgive his brothers instead. They've had that communication. They all know what the issues are. It's all been well communicated, and now he chooses to forgive with no strings attached. Joseph chooses God's way, not humanity's way. And we need to do the same in our own lives. It will never be easy. But it's hard work we need to take part in. We need to learn to let go of pain of what has been committed against us, whether by strangers or family, especially when family injuries can be the most painful. We can't let that poison our minds, as grudges will do. We can't let grudges poison our lives, because they create burdens that are just too heavy for us to carry. They will deform our lives, twist them out of shape. This story asserts that behind all the events of Joseph's life, when human evil occurred, God would work to bring good out of that evil, bring a life where death could easily have been the result. Annie Lamott writes, "Not forgiving is like drinking rat poison and then waiting for the rats to die. Forgiveness isn't easy." Notice the number of times that Joseph weeps throughout the many verses involved in this, alone and with his brothers, who had been terrified when they realized who was standing before them and the power that Joseph held, what he could have done. They fully expected Joseph's wrath, not his forgiveness. Their family experience trained them to expect that. Instead, Joseph said, "I'll provide a place for the entire family." He's looking forward to a reunion with his father, and he gives his brothers and their families shelter and safety for the 5 years of the remaining famine. But forgiveness takes time. It would be the work of years in this case, and it starts with that startling, surprising offer of help. Above and beyond, get a little grain so we don't starve to death. Forgiveness requires divine help, backing us up, just as God backed up Joseph. We need to acknowledge that we aren't strong enough to do it entirely by ourselves, that we need help from God, and this will help keep us humble. And there are times when the ones who have wounded us will need to prove their good faith, that they are now trustworthy people. His brothers had to do that in the case of Joseph. And he tested them hard before this, and no doubt they would prove themselves in the years that were to come. But still, reconciliation is possible, as Joseph's story dramatically demonstrates. Retaliation isn't necessary, but we need to expect God to have a hand in the reconciliation. And that's really useful, knowing that we're not going it alone. Forgiveness is like a rock thrown into a still pond. It has ripples that extend far beyond what we expect, especially if we trust that God is in the work and that we cooperate with God in making it happen. We can see that at work today. There are extraordinary stories of forgiveness that are in the news. They make news when people forgive when humans don't expect it to happen. For instance, there's a tragic story of a woman on the eve of her wedding. She's out with her friends, they're horsing around a pool, and someone bumps her into the shallow end, her head hits the bottom, her neck is cracked, and she is paralyzed. She has two options. She can hold a grudge forever on this, blaming her friends for her fate in her life, or they knew what they did. She can forgive them. Put that down, that burden down, and move on. She chose the path of forgiveness. She chose to live her life as best she could with the hand that she was dealt. She leaned into that. She went ahead and got married, and she lived the best life that she was capable of living. She forgave her friends for that freak accident so that she could get on with her life, so she could put her burden down. We need to trust God is with us and that He will work to improve our lives, even when human-made disasters strike. We need to lean into that. We need to work toward forgiveness rather than hold a poisonous grudge. It's too exhausting to spend years like Inigo Montoya practicing that line over and over again. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. We need to forgive and let God work God's miracles in our lives and the lives of those we choose to forgive. Let's pause for a moment of silent reflection.